My name's Katherine. I'm a sister with the MGLs. The sisters live up in North Bullen, but you'll usually see us around here on a Sunday. So I guess I'm starting today's reflection with the assumption that we've all suffered, that we've all been in a position in life where we've kind of cried out in our hearts to God, why? Why are you allowing this? Or where are you? Or how did this happen? I think suffering and the questions that it brings to mind are a fairly universal human experience. And as I read today's gospel, the raising of Lazarus, what I read in it was this question being asked over and over again. Why? Where were you? Why did you allow this? How could you? To Jesus. And what we find in this gospel is a number of different responses to this question by Jesus. So before I launch into the story itself, I just want to point out something that I've learned over the years in my reflecting on the mysteries of our faith. And that is that usually if we're talking about something that's a mystery of our faith, we're talking about something that doesn't have one little neat category that we can box it into. But they're more like, I would say, a diamond. You know how the beauty of a diamond is revealed when the light shines on it on lots of different angles. So really to unveil the beauty of a diamond, we need to cut lots of different facets on that diamond. And then when you shine a light on it, you get all the different beauty and colour coming off it, and you see something of the real beauty of the diamond. Well, in the same way I've discovered with the mysteries of our faith, if you think about the cross or the Trinity or the Eucharist, that there's not just one little neat category you can box them into, but in order to see their beauty, you need to look at them from lots of different angles and see the way that God has put this into it too, and this, and our kind of awe and wonder increase as we perceive how many different things God has packed into this one mystery. Now, I want to suggest today that the mystery of evil and suffering is one of those mysteries. And even what I go into today is not going to cover it all. But what I saw in this gospel as I read it was Jesus showing us some of the different facets of the mystery of suffering and evil. And I'd like to unpack them with you today. So as this gospel unfolds, nobody explicitly says to Jesus, why? Nobody questions him. But you can see all these moments where they either, I suspect, talked behind his back, or they said something to him which implied the question. So the first time this happened is in the opening of the story. Jesus is doing his usual thing, and a message comes to him from some close friends that Lazarus, the friend who he loves, is really sick. There's not a please come at once, but it's sort of implied. Jesus heals. The expectation is Jesus will come and do something about it. And he chooses to stay where he is for 2 more days. And then suddenly he decides that he's going to see Lazarus. And in his conversation with the disciples, it becomes really clear that Jesus already knows that Lazarus has died. Now, nobody says to Jesus, what are you doing here? Nobody says, why? But I can imagine that the disciples behind his back are going, why? What is in his head? Why is he doing this? Why would he allow his friend to die and only then go and visit? Jesus' response to the implied question is explicit. He speaks it out to his disciples and he says, for your sake, I am glad I was not there, because now you will believe. For your sake, I am glad I wasn't there, because now you will believe. Is that a satisfying answer to the why? Why did you allow your friend to suffer? Why didn't you go and do what you could have healed? Not really. It is an answer, and it's actually true. Part of the mystery of suffering and evil is that God allows it for our sake. for the sake of our faith, essentially for the sake of our eternal salvation. Do we understand the how? No. But it's true. However, this is never the only reason, and this is why I led with the diamond. This is one facet of how we can understand God's response and the truth that sits under the mystery of suffering and evil. So Jesus and the disciples, they hit the road and they head for Bethany. And they're nearly there when Martha hears that they're almost there, and she runs out to meet Jesus. She falls at his feet and she says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." It's not a question, is it? It's a statement. But it is a question. The question is, "Lord, why didn't you come? We sent for you. We gave you enough time to get here. And if you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. Why didn't you heal him? Don't you love him?" It's a question we often find rising in ourselves, I think, in these situations. Why? You could have. I know you could have. I believe you could have. And Jesus responds to her and he says, "Your brother will rise again." It's true, hey? Lazarus will rise again. And in our own situations of loved ones who die that he doesn't heal, it's true. They will rise again. It's another facet of the answer. Is it satisfying? Somewhat. Essentially, it means we're going to see them again. Does it touch our hearts? Maybe a little bit. Doesn't really answer the question in a way that comes to the heart of what's going on in us and our grief, does it? The resurrection. We'll come back to it. So Martha goes off after a little conversation with Jesus about the resurrection and believing in Jesus and trusting him. And she brings her sister back. And Mary comes running and she says the same thing to Jesus that Martha did. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Again, it's not a question, but it really is. Why weren't you here? We sent for you. Don't you love him? Why didn't you heal him? Why didn't you come in time? And Jesus wept. It's also an answer to the question, the mystery of suffering and evil. That God doesn't stand distant from our experience of suffering. That it hurts him when we are hurting. That he stands close to us and he weeps with us. Now, I would say that that's starting to become more comforting. It's still not completely satisfying. Still doesn't answer the million questions in my head of why. But at least I feel like God's not standing a distance, but he's with me in the experience of difficulty and suffering. Jesus asks Mary to take him to the tomb. And when they get there, there's a crowd of people standing around. Again, the same statement that's actually a question. They say, "He opened the eyes of the blind man. Couldn't he have prevented this man's death?" They're not asking him directly, but they're asking the question, why? Why didn't you do something? Why did you allow this? Where were you? Why didn't you come? Now, I need you to see Jesus' response to this question, because it's quite a visual answer that he gives us now. So he's come to the tomb, and St. John gives us the information that the tomb is a cave with a stone rolled across the entrance. And Jesus gives instructions that the stone be rolled away. And then standing in front of the tomb, he raises his eyes in prayer. Now you've got to think that Jews pray with their arms raised in Jesus' time. So Jesus is standing before an open tomb, a tomb with the stone rolled away, and he's praying like this. What do you see? I see God's ultimate answer to the question, the mystery of suffering and evil. I see an answer that draws in these other answers. I see a God who doesn't stand distant from our experience of suffering and evil, but enters right in and suffers with us and for us. I see a God who is committed to bringing us to the resurrection of the dead, to eternal life with him. And I see a God who mysteriously allows these things to happen in our lives for our sake, because he wants us to believe. He's asking of us trust. Do you believe? He says to Martha. Will you trust me? It gets down to the personal relationship we have with the Lord, but that relationship isn't founded on nothing. It's founded on this. That we as Christians, since Jesus' life and death and resurrection, have our faith founded on the truth of a God who entered into our suffering, entered in and from the inside conquered sin and death and all evil. And that God's ultimate answer is all mixed up in the passion and death and resurrection of Jesus. As we move towards the celebration of Easter in the next couple of weeks, I really invite you to enter into that celebration with this on your heart. That here is a God who has come here with me and for me, entered into the depths of the sufferings that I have, to bring new life, to bring freedom. The same freedom that he gives to Lazarus when he says, unbind him, let him go free. But in response, he asks us to trust him. Do you believe? And so that's the question I want to leave you with today. Do you believe? Can you trust him on this one?